Blessings. Good evening to you all on a warmish Tuesday spring evening. We have a few questions have come in today, so you can have a look at those. First one is, can you please tell us something about the life and teachings of Lumpur Sirichai? You can tell that's a monk question because probably most of you listening don't know who Lumpur Sirichai was. Lumpur is the word for a venerable old monk, means venerable grandfather. Sirichai was his name. And he lived much of his later life in the monastery called Wat Suan Tok in Chiang Mai City. He was a native of Chiang Mai City, northern Thailand. And one of the enjoyable things about living in Thailand is that there are many, many great meditation masters and teachers all over the place in all kinds of corners that you never realized, and then once in a while you'll come across them. So Lumpur Sirichai, he was the abbot of Wat Suan Tok. This monastery sits at the foot of the big mountain that oversees Chiang Mai City. It's called Doi Suthep, which has a beautiful monastery and golden pagoda on top with Buddha relics. This monastery is at the base, and it's one of the very old monasteries of the city, hundreds of years old. Its found beginnings are hard to trace, but it's a royal monastery, and Lumpur Sirichai lived there, and that's probably where he became well known in the area. But he actually, he's born at the end of the 19th century, so a long time ago now. Same sort of era as Lumpur Man and Lumpur Kuba Sirichai, who was his teacher. Kuba Sirichai is probably the most famous monk in northern Thailand. And that period, about 100 years ago, Lumpur Man, Lumpur Kuba Sirichai were both living in northern Thailand. So it was an era of where Buddhism was really flourishing in that part of the world. And they both were great meditation masters with lots of students and very well known and well respected. And Lumpur Sirichai was a disciple of Kuba Sirichai. So he became a monk, he became a novice monk, I think, when he was about 10 years old. Which is not uncommon in those days. Parents would send their sons off to the monastery to get an education, to learn how to be a good human being, often with the intention that they'd come back later and work and earn a living and raise a family. But Lumpur Sirichai never came back. Became a novice monk and then later became a fully ordained monk. And his nickname in Thai Buddhist culture is the Smiling Arahant, because he had a wonderful smile and a very pleasant demeanor, which he already had when he was a young monk. A very peaceful, quiet man. He's not known as a great kind of lecturer on Buddhism. His strength was more in the practice of and development of samadhi. He was known for having very powerful samadhi. So his amulets that he blessed are sought after, and he was often invited to blessing ceremonies where they were making Buddha statues or amulets, and he would sit there and we assume blast whatever was being made with a lot of radiant metta and good energy. But because he had this very pleasant nature, very calm, peaceful, gentle, harmless, humble kind of character, he'd been a monk for about 1 year and they already invited him to be abbot of a monastery. Not the famous monastery, Wat Suandok, but another monastery. So he became an abbot or a teacher at one vasa, which is quite unusual. Usually when you become a Buddhist monk, you spend the first 5 years with your teacher and you learn, you don't teach. And it may be many years before a monk becomes a teacher or an abbot. But he became an abbot after one vasa, which is probably a sign of how many good qualities he had and how trusted he was with a position of responsibility. And from then on, every few years he was asked to become the abbot of other monasteries, so he'd move from place to place. So in his early years as a monk, he did move around a bit, but at each place he was asked to be the abbot. So he never knew a time when he wasn't the abbot of a monastery, which is very unusual for monks, but a testament to his good character and wisdom and peace. So his teacher was Kuba Sirichai, and he learned many things from that teacher, he said. He said, number one was he learned the quality of satya barami, this love of truth and this sticking to your goal, you're being true to your goal. So his goal was to practice for Nibbana, practice the Buddhist monk's life, do it properly, learn the rules, learn the meditation techniques, and with the aim of freeing his mind from suffering. So he said Satya Bharami is what he learnt from Kuba Sirichai, to be firm, stick to his goal, not give up, not sway, not get distracted by other things in life, but to be true to his goal. So that's what he said he got from Kuba Sirichai. And he also said if you want to really progress in the Buddhist practice, you have to have sila, sense of what is morally right and wrong in your conduct. You have to have ethical conduct. He said that's the foundation of both developing meditation and wisdom and insight that will free your mind from suffering. So he's known for being very strict in keeping the monks' discipline, and in his monastery the monks had to keep the discipline very strictly. Even though he was very pleasant, the smiling arahant, he was also you would call him a disciplinarian, but he wasn't nasty about it or authoritarian or a bully. It was just out of respect for the Buddha and seeing the value of being committed to the practice, he would encourage the monks to be very strict with their discipline, because that helps in the training of the mind. And so his teacher, Kuba Sirichai, is famous for building and rebuilding and renovating many monasteries throughout northern Thailand, often shrines and stupas on the tops of little mountains, sort of way out in the middle of nowhere where there are no roads and no electricity and no infrastructure. And so sometimes Lumpur Sirichai would follow his teacher to help renovate these pagodas and monasteries in remote places. And then later on in his life, whenever he'd visit a monastery, if they had a building or a pagoda that had been renovated by Kuba Sirichai, he'd always go there and bow. And they say one of his foremost qualities was gratitude to his teacher. So he's always remembering his teacher, Kuba Sirichai, always bowing to his picture or a pagoda wherever there was one. And Wat Suandok has some relics of Kuba Sirichai, which Lumpur Sirichai brought there and was always recollecting his teacher, bowing, paying respects to the shrine to his teacher. So he's known for his gratitude. I visited that monastery many times over the years, strangely enough, because like his teacher, Kuba Sirichai, Lumpur Sirichai was a vegetarian. And so perhaps that's one reason why a little vegetarian cafe was established on the edge of the perimeter of that monastery, because the monastery is within the bounds of Chiang Mai city, so it's what you call a city monastery. And then they have this very well-known vegetarian cafe there, and occasionally when traveling through Chiang Mai, people have taken me there for a meal before. Very quiet, peaceful monastery, even though it is on the edge of the city. It's always had a very peaceful ambience to it, quite a nice place to go. And people stop there on the way going up towards the mountain of Doi Suthep. There's another famous story. There's a teacher, Lumpur Sirichai. He's a famous meditation master in Thailand, and he once met Lumpur Khamsen, and they had a conversation which was recorded, so that's why we know about it. And Lumpur Sirichai was asking him about his personal practice, which doesn't happen very often, but when these teachers meet, sometimes it does. So Lumpur Sirichai was asking him about, what he had attained in his practice, what his goal was, what he had attained, and this was when he was later in life. And his answer was, I never finished learning the chant Itipiso Bhagawa, which we chant, the recollection of the main qualities of the Buddha, which at first hearing sounds strange because he was a monk who could chant very well and obviously knew the words of that chant. So when he said, I didn't finish learning it, the lay people listening were surprised and didn't understand why he answered that way. But Lumpur Sirichai understood. It's a kind of way of saying, I at one time aspired to become a Buddha, but I'd given it up, that aspiration. I didn't become a Buddha, or I gave up the aspiration to become a Buddha, the Bodhisattva path. So he never finished learning Itipiso Bhagawa. He said, I finished my learning at Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sankho, the recollection of the qualities of the Sangha, the Arya Sangha. So again, other monks listening understood this as to say he followed the path of Sāvaka, a disciple of the Buddha, and they believe reached Nibbana as a disciple of the Buddha rather than aiming to become a Buddha himself. So a very well-loved and respected monk in his time. He died a few years before I went to Thailand in the 1970s. And they say he had one of those beautiful deaths. What we call beautiful deaths in Sangha is when the monk is conscious well enough and mindful enough to know he's about to die. And if you think about it, many people in the world don't know they're about to die. It's a surprise, or they're just not prepared for it mentally, or they're suffering so much, they're in hospital, or they're on medication, unconscious, But many monks die a beautiful death, a result of their living the life of a monk, keeping sila, mindful, practicing mindfulness throughout their life. So the day he died, he knew he was going to die, so he dressed himself, even though he's very weak. I can't remember what the cause of death was. It may have been old age, but probably there was a particular illness. But he got dressed, wearing his robes, and got his attendant monk to help assist him to walk over to the main shrine of the meditation hall. And he prostrated 3 times. And if you see pictures of him, you'll see often he's wearing the meditation beads, which monks in northern Thailand often wear as a formal kind of thing in their pictures. So he had his meditation beads around his neck, and he grabbed his beads, he bowed 3 times, and he grabbed them 3 times. Usually they have 108 beads, but he just went through 3 for Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and after he'd gone through 3 beads, he asked the monks to help lay him down in front of the Buddha statue. So he lay down and just died there and then. So he bowed, recollected Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and then passed away. So we call that a beautiful death, mindful, aware, and recollecting his teacher, the Buddha, and Kuba Sirichai with gratitude. So there's not a lot of stories about him, but what stories you hear are always very inspiring. He's a monk who led a very beautiful, peaceful life and then passed away. Back to another question. What can we do in meditation when we experience endless thinking and no mindfulness? So that's why we meditate, we practice. And when you try any meditation technique, what it exposes first of all is your lack of mindfulness and the kind of uncontrolled thinking that we are exposed to so much in our life. And you kind of feel helpless, don't you? When you begin meditation, it feels like a hopeless task to bring your mind under control, to restrain it, to develop mindfulness on an object. It seems hopeless. So you need lots of patience, a good attitude, some goodwill for yourself. Faith in the teacher helps because it gives you a bit of strength. So thinking of the Buddha or your meditation teacher helps. And then practice. And through patient effort and regular practice, your level of mindfulness will gradually improve. So if you use a meditation object like a mantra, like Buddha, or the breath, your aim is to bring your mind to pay attention to your meditation object so that it will let go of all the uncontrolled thoughts, the random thoughts, the worries, the thoughts about the past, worries and concerns about the future, etc., etc., etc. You're letting go of them by placing your attention on the meditation object. So if you do the breathing meditation, often they encourage you to do counting. When you first begin breathing meditation, to really anchor your mind with the feeling of the breath, but also the counting. So you breathe in, you count 1, breathe out 1, breathe in 2, breathe out 2, and you go up to maybe 5, and then 6, and then 7, and then 8, and then 9, 10, and the aim is to be mindful of each in-breath, each out-breath, with the counting, and not lose count. But if you lose count, you start yourself back at 1. So it's almost like a game, but it's setting yourself small tasks to achieve, to be mindful of each in-breath and out-breath and gradually extend the amount of counting until you reach 10, but no need to go beyond 10. Or if you're using Buddha, your aim is to stay with Buddha. Buddha, 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 Buddha. And as soon as your mind runs away and you realize it, you bring it back to Buddha. And that is the heart of our meditation. When your mind is with Buddha or the breath, you have the quality of mindfulness. You're recollecting in the present moment, you're aware. So then you can cut off the endless thoughts. And just keep at it. And most people find if they do practice regularly, they improve. How fast, how slow depends on different factors, like how much time we give it, how much commitment, how much effort we put in. Various things will affect it, but if you keep practicing, things will improve. Your body becomes more used to sitting still, so that helps because there's less pain, less itching, less discomfort. And your mind gets used to coming to pay attention on the breath and letting go of everything else. And of course, if you learn walking meditation, that will only assist in improving the level and the power of your mindfulness. As you practice mindfulness of walking, reciting Buddha, or being aware of the feet moving, can bring the same benefit as sitting meditation. And if you practice every day regularly, then you'll get better at it. Really, there's no other way to do it. You just keep working at it. Don't give up. And sometimes the Buddha gave kind of last resort or desperate means types of teachings. So if you really can't stop the thinking, you can hold your breath and don't let yourself breathe until you've established mindfulness to cut off the thinking. So the fear of death will bring you to the present moment, and you say, when am I going to allow myself to breathe? And that cuts through all the other thoughts you might have. Or the recollection of death. Whatever you're thinking about doesn't really matter if you're about to die. So you bring up that recollection of death, so it's really present in your mind. I could die right now, or tonight could be my last night. You eat a meal, this could be my last meal, then I die. So the recollection of death also helps to end the sort of endless thinking about different things. The equivalent of endlessly scrolling on your phone between different channels or different topics, different people. We do it in our mind. We're just endlessly scrolling or surfing from thought to thought to thought. So you have to cut through that, through the practice of mindfulness, and recollection of death can help. When you recollect death, that's it. There's nothing else to think about, is there? If you're about to die, you just want mindfulness in the present moment. That's all you need. Another question. Is it okay to chant the Paritta chanting daily? Yes, it is. It is okay. As you know, on the live stream, we do once a week on the full moon and half moon days, but you can chant Parittas every day if you want, and you can do twice a day, morning and evening. It's really up to you. There's certain aspects of the practice that you can take into account your personal character. So some people like to chant more, some people like to chant less. Some people like chanting Parittas. It brings up a lot of energy, faith, and that can lead on to mindfulness, samadhi, very wholesome states of mind. Other people like to chant reflections. Other people like to chant in praise of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Everyone has their own particular likes, and of course some people don't like chanting very much, and it's not necessarily wrong. So there's room for personalization of chanting practice, how much, how little, which chants you like. And it's a bit like dana. They said when you practice generosity, they asked the Buddha, what kind of generosity is best? And the Buddha said, well, what makes you feel satisfied? Offering food to monks, or doing charity to help the poor or the sick, or building a meditation hall, or if it's nowadays, you could say paying for the electricity or the water for a monastery or something. There's so many different things. Some people like to print books and so on. In many ways you can practice charity, generosity. In the same way, there's many ways to approach chanting. How long you chant. Some people chant just briefly and then meditate. Some people will chant for an hour. What you chant, how long, how often, that's up to you based on your experience. And if you find chanting Parittas helps you in your meditation, in developing calm, serene states of mind, well, do it. And you have to look at the results of what you do. And if your mind is becoming more peaceful, more wholesome, more skillful, that's a good sign. So if you do chant Parittas regularly, you'll get to know those words. Hopefully you'll get to know the meaning of the Pali, the translation in your own language. So once you know the meaning, it's not only a practice of mindfulness with the chanting, it's also a learning experience, and you're reminding yourself of the meaning and reflecting on the meaning, reflecting on the goodness of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, reflecting on, say, you chant the 38 blessings. There's a lot of different reflections and wisdom in that chant and so on. Every chant has its own value in that sense. So if you find it good, then keep it up, and I'm sure it will benefit your practice. And then you've got, if you learn them off by heart, you've got those Paritta chants with you for any occasion. You've got spare time and you're not sure what to do, you can chant. You're sitting in a car, someone else can be driving, you just quietly chant to yourself. You're waiting for a difficult operation, surgical operation in the hospital. You're waiting there for hours, sitting on a bed, so you can chant. An earthquake is happening, you can chant. Whatever the situation, you can turn to chanting as a way to steady your mind, brighten your mind at that time. You're angry with someone, and you don't know what to do because you're just fuming and want to throttle them. Go and chant the paritas, and that may help that mood disperse from your mind, and you calm down. And then maybe when you're calm, you can see with more wisdom what you need to do, what you need to let go of, what you need to develop. So chanting can be a gateway to many other good experiences in the practice. Another question. What does the Ajahn Chah teaching, if you have not cried deeply a number of times in your meditation, it has not really begun? What does that mean? So the quote is, if you have not cried deeply a number of times, your meditation has not really begun. That's a quote from Ajahn Chah. So what does it mean? Well, I think it's pointing to the fact that the practice of meditation and training your mind in the Buddhist sense, following the Buddhist path, it goes in very deep. It affects you emotionally, intellectually, and your whole being is changing for the better. So as you put effort into the meditation, if you put real effort into your meditation, it's a very frustrating, tiring, challenging experience. It's not easy to train the human mind. It can bring you to the point of frustration, and so it can be tears of frustration at how difficult it is, how foolish your mind can be, clinging on to things, how much time you've wasted, how many stupid thoughts you've had. It can be thoughts of just waking up. The experience of waking up to the truth can bring tears. Can be tears of joy as you see the way of practice. As you practice letting go of something you've been holding on to, some anger that you've let go of, some greed and desire that you've let go of, some fear. It can be tears of joy and relief at seeing the benefit of letting go and having a glimpse of the mind that is completely peaceful and unconditioned, what we say, the unconditioned, a glimpse of nibbana, when you experience the cessation of something you were formerly being disturbed by and clinging to, and it was causing you suffering, and then you let go. So tears of relief, tears of joy. So there are a number of different experiences that will prompt tears sometimes, but I think Ajahn Chah was maybe pointing out that if you've never experienced this at all, perhaps your meditation is just scratching the surface. You need to try harder and be more sincere and go into your practice more deeply, and it may lead to having a few of these experiences. It's not absolutely essential to shed tears, and certainly we don't want people to be shedding tears of suffering and stress, but it's a natural result of the practice. Is sometimes you're going in quite deep and letting go of emotional attachments and delusions that have been there for a long time. So that often brings tears of relief, tears of gratitude, tears of joy. There are different emotional states and positive emotions that will bring tears with them. Or as I said, sometimes just tears of frustration at how hard it is. And one time Ajahn Chah said he cried was when his robe, monk's robe, split. He was, in those days, back in the 1930s, 1940s, there's very little support for forest monks. So to get cloth to make your robes is very hard. You can't ask, the rules don't allow you to ask for cloth. You have to wait till someone gives it to you or offers it to you, and that doesn't always happen. So he had a robe that was being patched with every little bit of scrap cloth he could find just to keep it together, and with the best sewing and the best care in the world, cloth eventually loses its strength just through time and particularly being exposed to the weather. In monks, we spend a lot of time outdoors exposed to the rain, the sun, the cold, so cloth gradually loses its strength and then it starts to just fall apart. There's nothing you can do. Even if you patch it, you're just patching holes together. So Ajahn Chah had this robe that was just patched together and there was nothing left, no strength to the material. And one day he was walking meditation, so he was putting a lot of effort into his meditation practice for many hours, and he needed a rest, and he squatted down the way you might do for a rest when you're in the forest. Nothing to sit on, no seat, but you just squat down for a change of posture. And as he squatted, the tension on the robes split the whole robe and it just collapsed. But it brought tears to his eyes because he's thinking, wow, to follow what the Buddha taught is so difficult. You're not allowed to ask people for things, for help, for support. You just have to get by. And this is one of the things he passed on to his students. You learn not to ask for things, to just get by with what's available. So, one of the things I learned when I was a young monk, you don't ask for a cup. And you need a cup to drink, but if no one gives you one, then you don't ask. So in the tradition of Wat Pah Pong, I had a cup for a while that was just a piece of bamboo. Because if you cut a section of bamboo inside, you got a hollow there. You can use it for a cup. It's not a very good cup, certainly not for hot drinks. It's not very good, but it's okay for water. So then I was offered a cup from the kitchen because they saw my bamboo piece of bamboo cup, and then they offered me a plastic cup. It wasn't a nice plastic cup. It was like a plastic cup that had been kicking around the kitchen probably for years, and it was grotty and chipped and horrible, but that's what I got. And all of that was because out of faith in Lumpur Cha, you just follow the style of practice, so you don't ask for things. And Lumpur Cha obviously practiced that very well, and he was very disciplined, so he literally practiced to the point where his robes were falling off his body because they were so worn out. So he said that brought tears to his eyes, just thinking how difficult it is to train the mind to give up attachment, desire. So I think most people who've meditated for many years will probably say that there'll be a time they can remember where they've been brought to tears by the difficulties they've gone through in training the mind, training this heart to give up, to let go, to accept things. Say if you've been hurt or bullied or insulted by people, and then you're practicing the sila and mindfulness and restraint, to not give in to your anger and not argue with them or seek revenge on them, that can bring tears, can't it? You can think, to not give in to my anger is so hard when somebody has been so unkind to you or hurt you so much. It can bring tears to your eyes, but it can be a release as well. So you're getting beyond your attachment. Maybe afterwards, the other side of the tears, you're at a point where you're not affected anymore. Your mind is peaceful. It doesn't matter what they say or do. That's their business. If they want to make bad karma, that's their business. But you're not going to give in to your anger. But at first, that's a struggle, isn't it? You want to follow anger, your angry thoughts, or speak angry words, do things in anger. And you restrain that, it can bring tears to your eyes, struggling with your own attachment. But once the tears come, there's the release, and then you get something better afterwards. You get clarity, you get peace, you're stronger. Your mind actually becomes stronger for these tears. So those are spiritual tears coming from the struggles of the practice. So they're not just tears of suffering, just an expression of suffering. There's a purpose to them, and there's a reason why they come. Another question, or is it a statement? Dear Ajahn, during the earthquake, we were trying to exit our house thinking the house will collapse. Then at the same time, a thought came to my mind: how can I go out leaving my Lord Buddha statue inside the home? But then I thought, even though the home might collapse, the area where the statue is will be safe for sure. In the tsunami of 2004 in Sri Lanka, many Buddha statues seemed to be untouched by the tsunami. At the same time as thinking this, the shaking stopped. It surprised me. So it's more of a statement than a question. A few years ago, there was a teacher, Lumpur Kun, who was a disciple of Ajahn Chah, came to visit us. He's visited us a few times over the years, and his monastery is in northern Thailand, again, Chiang Rai province. And just before he visited us, they had an earthquake. And Thailand, like Melbourne, they don't usually have earthquakes, they're quite rare. But the centre of that earthquake was just down the road from his monastery. And he's quite a well-known teacher. He gives very good Dhamma talks. He's on radio and TV sometimes in Thailand, quite well known. And many years ago they had built a huge white Buddha statue at the front of his monastery. It was like concrete rendered with a white render. And that image was very well known on social media, TV, as well as locals. They all knew it. And in the earthquake, it completely cracked and was destroyed. So when he came here, we were asking him about it, and somebody said, "Oh, the Buddha was destroyed. Is this a sign? What kind of sign is it to us? What's it telling us?" And Lumpur said, "It's telling us we've got to make a new one." In very down-to-earth, practical, common sense wisdom, he said, "Yeah, Buddha statues are impermanent too, and it's just telling us we've got to make a new one, more beautiful, more serene than the last one." And this event drew a lot of attention in Thailand because they don't have many earthquakes. So he was on the national news one evening afterwards or whatever, and they were all standing around looking at the broken statue and saying, "What are we going to do?" And he was saying, "Well, we have to rebuild it." And so people from all over the country were inspired to send funds, and people came with designs for a new statue, and artisans came, and they built a beautiful new statue that was bigger than before, stronger than before, more beautiful than before. So out of adversity and disaster came something good. It's a very Buddhist response to disaster. Even if you do lose your Buddha statue for some reason, maybe that's a chance to build a better one or get a new one. Do things again, better, or just do them the same as again. Because life is like that, isn't it? You can't control things, certainly not earthquakes. They just prove that material things are impermanent. We can't always protect them. If they're protected, that's good. But if they're not, well, never mind, we can rebuild, because they're just material things. Even a Buddha statue is made of something, stone or bronze or wood. We can make a new one. So it is lovely to have very old, ancient, venerated Buddha statues in very old temples or places. So in Thailand, sometimes they even find them in the forest, old Buddha statues that have been lost and forgotten and buried for hundreds of years. And then somebody, there's a famous story in Phuket where they have a huge Buddha statue that came up from the ground, and there was a farmer and he was just grazing his water buffalo, and he needed something to tie his water buffalo to, so there was a spike sticking out of an area where there's a lot of rock, and so he tied up the water buffalo to the spike. And he started thinking, why is there a spike here? And he looked and investigated, and it was the top of a Buddha statue, and they rediscovered a Buddha statue. So sometimes, very old monasteries with old statues, they have a great feeling to them, good energy, place where people have come and done a lot of good things over many generations, many centuries. They are inspiring, but they're also impermanent. So sometimes we have to accept that. But if your Buddha statue was saved, the earthquake stopped, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Luckily it was only a brief earthquake, not too destructive. Last question. How do you deal with feeling uninspired and tired in the practice of Dhamma? Well, you just have, first of all, just accept it. It's part of life, isn't it? Sometimes we do feel uninspired and tired. If you can bring up enough awareness to accept it's just a feeling and it's just the way it is at that time, that already reduces the suffering of the experience, doesn't it? You just bring up, oh, it feels like this. So we have these reflections, we say, it feels like this. This is the way things are. So sometimes you have a lack of inspiration. Say you're injured or you're ill, so you can't do the things you want to do. So you feel uninspired, fed up. You have to accept them. It's just the way it is. These things can change for the better. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be like that all the time. Or maybe you've been putting a lot of effort into your meditation for many days and then your mind just goes flat and there's no feeling of joy. You feel very kind of unenthusiastic, bored, distracted, fed up. Well, mental states like that are just part of the practice. We just get to know them. So you can say, I gained something from this, my meditation today. I gained the understanding that when I'm uninspired, it feels like this. That's still a gain, even though it's a hard one gain. Knowing pain, knowing unpleasant mind states, unpleasant feelings in the body is part of the practice. Being mindful of them, knowing a feeling as a feeling, a mental state, a thought as a thought, a mood as a mood, even the negative ones give us something, some knowledge, some understanding when you turn them into an object for mindfulness and wise reflection. So maybe that's one thing you can aim towards when you're feeling uninspired, just to know that. And you don't add to the experience, you just know it, but try not to get caught up in it or dwell on it, get lost in it. When you're mindful, you can know an experience. It's like this, it's not the best, but it's like this. And then you let go. You accept it. You're at peace with the unpleasant experience, the feelings of tiredness, the thoughts, the negative thoughts. But you're not adding to them. You're not creating a self out of them, embellishing them, making up them into some big drama. You're just knowing it. Oh, it feels like this. And that's wisdom. That's a gain. That's something you can build on. And so next time you feel the same, you say, oh, I know this, I've been here before. I was mindful of this last week when I felt uninspired and tired. Here it is again. Okay, I know this, no big deal. Once you know something, it doesn't cause you so much stress and suffering, does it? You just know it. And little by little, you're diminishing the attachment to that experience, so it'll come up less often and less intensely. So where, in the beginning of your practice, you may have long periods where you feel uninspired and struggling and life is difficult. But if you keep practicing and developing this awareness and knowledge, maybe a few years later you can say, oh yeah, I get uninspired, but it's just a thought. It comes, it goes, it arises, it ceases, it's just that much. And that's progress, isn't it? When you have a better attitude, a more skillful attitude, even to unpleasant experiences. So maybe that's something to work on, developing your mindfulness, how to be mindful with the unpleasant as well as the pleasant. The pleasant is the opposite, isn't it? When you have pleasant experiences, you feel enthusiastic, you want to do it, you're happy. You can get lost in that as well, can't you? It carries you away, and then when it fades away, it ends, then you feel down. It's like you go to a high and then you crash down again. You go to a low, well, you can come up again. You go to a high, you might come down again. So mindfulness keeps your mind more even in the middle, and not getting so attached to the ups and downs of life. So that's the end of the questions for tonight.